Okay, we are in the studio, we're in the room. Hi, y'all. Welcome back to the Chaos Club Reads and Possibly Even Spoils. I'm Megan,
And I'm Rachel.
and we are still on The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshanna Zuboff. We're doing chapters 7 and 8 today, and we're still in the thick of it. We're still in the middle of the dark grim, so sorry.
I should point out we actually are starting a new section. This is part 2 today. So the part 1 is what we've been talking about so far, which was really focused on the foundations of surveillance capitalism. And this section is a little bit shorter, I believe. It's only 5 chapters instead of 6, and this is the advance of surveillance capitalism. Part 3 is called Instrumentarian Power for a Third Modernity. So I'm sure that's going to have lots of thrilling material in it for us to chat about when we get there.
So much thrilling, big words, huge words here.
Love it. So I'll just jump in right here so we can get started, Megan. In chapter 7, called The Reality Business, they start out by talking about the prediction imperative. And what they're getting at here is that the technologies behind what we're doing, they have this quote here that says the most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they're indistinguishable from it. I think this is an interesting point, the ways that our technology, because we were actually talking about this before we started this podcast of like, okay, well, can you even extract yourself from the technology? Is that a good thing? It really, in so many ways, has become indistinguishable, I think, from our everyday life, at least for Americans and Americans that are like, working in the typical workforce or have kids doing stuff. The quote here that I really liked right after that was they're describing about how companies like Google and Facebook and Microsoft that were being drawn to the surveillance revenue, so like making money off of surveilling us, and have staked their claims on the internet's disappearance because they must. And then she says, compelled to improve predictions, surveillance capitalists such as Google understand they have to widen and diversify their extraction architectures to accommodate new sources of surplus and new supply operations. And then the way they describe that, or the way she describes that, the next paragraph down, and this to me was kind of the key paragraph that I was moving toward, is she says the shift toward economies of scope defines a new set of aims. Behavioral surplus must be vast, but it also must be varied. These variations are developed along 2 dimensions. The first is the extension of extraction operations from the virtual world into the real world, where we actually live our lives. And then surveillance capitalists understood that their future wealth would depend on new supply routes that extend to real life on the roads, among the trees, throughout the cities. Extension wants your bloodstream and your bed, your breakfast conversation, your commute, your run, your refrigerator, your parking space, your living room. And I think that sort of like almost like cancerous sort of
Mm.
imagery that these tendrils that are just kind of coming into our lives largely without our consent. And if we are consenting, we're surely not consenting to understanding the scope of what's being extracted from us. I'm curious how
Mhm.
that hits you, Megan, and if any of that
Yeah,
resonated with you.
yeah. I think the cancer metaphor is a really good one because it just keeps metastasizing. And there's a guy who he's been doing a lot of like independent journalism. His name's Ed Zitron, and he coined this term called the rot economy. And he just really kind of takes to task this growth in any cost model precisely because they have to find new ways, new mining operations, because essentially that's what these companies are doing.
Yeah.
They are mining experience. And it's interesting, last year or year before, I had started exploring the concept of narrative versus database based on Mike Sakasa's work. He talks about the database and how it kind of fractures our thought, it fractures our information. Most of my friends, and I know from my own experience, some I've used a tool like Notion. Most of my friends have heard me on a, multi-year love affair with Notion. And it genuinely was life-changing for me, but one of the things I've realized over the last year or so is I've never been able to make it work as a creative tool. I've never
Mm.
been able to make it work as an environment that would allow me to be creative, that would allow me to do the kind of messy, exploratory thought that I've wanted. And I think it's precisely because Notion requires that everything goes into a database.
Yeah.
Notion, all of our online experience is a database. We just experience different user interfaces for those databases. So all of our experience gets atomized into left hand, right hand, up, down, black, white, salt, pepper. These very basic, distinct, discrete categories. And we didn't realize that we were being formed by that interaction, I think. And I think we still don't fully realize how much we've been formed by that interaction and how much that shapes how we interact with the world and how much we expect now our personal experiences to be atomized and
Yeah.
stored in such a way.
It's
And I
strange. Yeah, go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, and I think that that's something I think that that's just something that's slowly coming more to our superficial awareness, at least those who are thinking more about it. The average person may not necessarily realize how much they've been shaped, but I think that that's one of the things that I'm curious about is how do we bring that to a more common awareness? I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah. It's weird because I think there's this sort of uncanny like no, like notion. I watched this I got this really weird video on my TikTok like last night, and it was like a nostalgia page, and it was just like there was no words to it, but it was just like the picture of like a split level house, and like the cicadas were like buzzing. It had a very like 90s feel to it. And then like walked inside and there was like a TV show on, like all of the furniture inside like looked like 90s, and there was like a 90s TV show on. And I was like, it was so funny because like I felt in myself like, oh my gosh, like I remember those color schemes on everything. I remember like those sort of very warm tones that you saw everywhere, and like
anyone here for reality bites?
yeah, like it just was like, and I thought to myself like, I what is so different? Like, and I'm looking at the comments and kind of scrolling through, and everybody's kind of like nostalgic for the 90s kind of thing. And like what was so different about that time that like I don't know, it just doesn't feel like I can't quite put my finger on what it is, but it literally feels at like almost like an existential level that like my literal existence like I feel like a different person. And part of me wonders if it goes back to like I'm not maybe I felt like I had more agency as a kid because I didn't have to go to work, and like I didn't have a million small people that I was responsible to like keep alive and well, and
Yeah. You have
you know
real life Tamagotchis.
and well, and like on top of that, like just like let's just talk about how challenging it is just to keep oneself like I'm talking about like I made myself breakfast, like somebody give me a gold star on my crown. That's what I feel like right now. It's hard enough to keep myself healthy and
Yeah.
well and good, much less
And
other people and animals and whatever. So maybe that's why, but it does feel like, and I think to pull it back to this conversation, this whole the dynamic of behavioral surplus accumulation, she has this like image in on page 203 in the book, and she there's a little caption at the top, and she says surveillance capitalism's master motion is accumulation of new sources of behavioral surplus with more predictive power. The goal is predictions comparable to guaranteed outcomes in real life behavior. Extraction begins online, but the prediction imperative increases the momentum, driving extraction toward new sources in the real world. And like part of me is like, maybe we did have more agency. Like maybe
Yep.
now it's like I'm a zombie on my phone flipping through stuff. And then I like get up, and all I really know of what to do is whatever my phone has really shaped me to
Mm,
do. Like, even to the extent of like, do I have a creative idea in my body? No. Like, what books do I go buy at the store? The ones that I see like 5 billion book talkers talk about, right? Like clothes, what styles do I have? Oh, like what earring stacks do I have? The ones I see all the girlies wearing on TikTok. What like we're so, and I guess but it feels like more than marketing. It feels like more than just like I saw an annoying commercial for like State Farm on my TV while I was watching
sure.
Andor or whatever. It's more like it knows me so well. What's the point of even choosing anything? Because it already
Mhm.
knows I'm like a 30 something millennial mom who like is evangelical, but sometimes like is critiquing the evangelical movement, but like is also like really loves not 90s nostalgia and like has a penchant for like Mean Girls and likes to read. Like it just knows me so well, and it's like you
Yeah.
would like this. And then I
But
just feel
here's
like
the thing, it knows your
yeah.
past.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all it knows, and that's why it's so desperate to intervene
Mm-hmm.
and shape, because all they can go on is the past, and that's why I think there's so much, like, tripping back to nostalgia, because we're trying because we're being we're being formed to look backward anyway. Because that's
Yeah.
all the internet, that's all these technologies can do, is extract is look at our past behavior. And that's why they're trying to turn to these predictive interventions. And I think it's so interesting that they're trying to guarantee certainty. I mean, they're trying to do this like the biggest mass social control operation ever. And they're trying to predict certainty. And I'm just kind of going, do any of y'all read history ever? Do any of you all actually understand human nature at all? I, that's legit one of the things about human nature is every once in a while you get this wild card.
Yeah, for sure. I also kind of wonder if like all of the stuff has actually hindered our creativity. Like on one hand, it's fascinating to me the level of like creativity that's out there on the internet. It's like really
Sure.
wild, like how quickly somebody can like take some random quote. I know my husband and I were laughing about this. Um, like, in the early 2000s when you had like 4 or 5 YouTube videos that you would like watch on repeat, or not even early 2000s. I think YouTube was
Does anyone
2005.
remember that OK Go, the treadmill
Yeah, like
dance?
I mean, they still
That
make
was that
videos.
was
There's,
across the
yeah,
middle.
it was like that one, but yeah, you'd like watch like 5 times and show your friends and be like, oh my gosh, you have to see the video. We were watching like old Flight of the Concords videos the other day, and then we were like watching the video of that like that guy Antoine Dotson when he was talking about there was like a news clip about like the rapist in Lincoln Park, and then they like these other two guys took the clip of Antoine Dotson and they like made a song of it, and it was like the coolest thing, but like the turnaround time on all that, because I remember when it happened, when like that clip of the whole rapist thing went viral and everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is so funny. And not the rapist, just to be clear, like it's not, rape
Yeah,
is
yeah,
not
yeah,
funny.
yeah,
The clip itself though, the way he talks
yeah.
about it is it's entertaining. It was very entertaining in 2008. And he's still like on the internet. I saw him. He like came up on my FYP the other day. I was like, that's Antoine Dotson. He was like a little bit of a celebrity. And then it probably took like a few weeks, right? Like for like
Mm,
these kids to pick up this thing, turn it into a song, and then everybody was singing the song, right? And now it's like literally within like there'll be some stupid quote on the news, and then
mhm.
I'll see like 3 or 4 renditions of like here's my like funny making this quote into a song
And
or whatever within like hours. So
yeah,
it's just fascinating how like fast the creative
sure.
sort of riffing. I think the riffing that we see
Yeah.
on the internet right now as creativity
Mhm.
is at an all-time peak. It's almost like a golden age, but the just generative material out of nothing almost,
Mm.
the kind of long form craft that takes a long time. I mean, I think that the flip of that is we're recording this right after Ryan Coogler's Sinners just came out, and it's like making a huge splash. And of course, everybody's shocked. Why is everybody shocked when a horror movie does well? But is the highest grossing original IP, like non
Nice.
franchise movie since 2020. So for the 2020s, this is the
Nice.
highest grossing. So horror movie by a black director. The most recent one, or like the one that beats it out next, like that is the next highest, isn't until 2017, and it's Jordan Peele's Us, also a horror
Okay.
movie, also by a black director.
Mm.
And I wonder to myself, like, if, that when I saw Sinners, I mean, when I saw Jordan Peele's movies as well for the first time, like Get Out in particular, there was something in it's fun to watch the riffs on the internet. It's a good chuckle and it's always
Sure.
entertaining. But when you see like that kind of creativity from nothing,
Mm.
it doesn't feel like it's riffing on the next thing. It doesn't feel like it's from an echo chamber. It feels like it's something entirely different.
Yeah.
It's so rare to even, I feel like, see that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's the thing. I'm still digesting, but Christina Rosen wrote this book called The Extinction of Experience. And she just really is looking at different aspects of human experience. And she's getting at, I think what Mike Sakasas was getting at was we keep databasing our experience. We keep taking a picture of it. We
It's,
keep posting on Instagram. We keep posting on TikTok. We keep
yeah,
databasing our experience instead of, experiencing it. And experiencing it is very different from capturing it. And I think that that might be one of the things that you're describing about Ryan Coogler's Sinners is he took the time to experience his life. He took the time to
yeah.
experience his ideas. He took the time to let them percolate and germinate and let them sit next to each other, which is something that the database can't do because the database equivalizes. Is that a word? It makes equivalency
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
of all of the things. And you read the quote earlier about how these companies want to go into your morning commute, your living
Yeah.
room, your Roomba, all of the stuff. They want to do that. And let me think about where I was going with that databasing. Oh, your experience of a sunset and the Roomba's reading, picking up dust in a database is the exact same thing. That the database reads those as bytes of information and sees them as the exact same thing. And it sees them as something that can be combined and recombined in different ways. But they're the same. I mean, they're the exact, like there is no value judgment in a database.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're seeing with something like Ryan Coogler is he took the time to make value judgments on the information, the experiences that he was having that were percolating together. It's not that every single idea became part of that movie. It's that he took the time to figure out, this idea is actually going to serve the story better than this
Yeah.
idea. And you can't do that without stepping back and experiencing and thinking and developing your ideas and your taste. And that's where creativity stems from. And this is not at all to minimize the work that happens. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening online that does happen very fast, but it is of a very different kind of creativity and it is shaped for a very different purpose by in very different media.
And also, like, there's so much of it now. As fun as it is, as soon as one comes, like, right, like when you think back about the videos that were viral, like really weird viral videos in 2010, like there's like four or five that like everyone
Mhm.
remembers, right? It's funny because then when you go on the internet now and like people are making
Yeah.
stuff now, they're like
Yeah.
referencing those four or five, and it's like very niche. But now the stuff that's happening, it's happening so fast and there's so many of them. As quick as
Yeah.
you experience it, you've forgotten it. It really is
Sure.
very mindless, which is why I
Yeah.
think something like you've hit the nail on the head in terms of like the time that Kugler spent sort of also, I think not just the time that he spent on the movie, but that like he also seems to have a very like high self-awareness of who he is in the process
Mhm.
of directing. I don't think I think he's really making the art that he feels called to make because
Yeah.
he's him. There's a really, I won't spoil anything because you'll know, well, I'll say
I
this.
do wanna see it. I do
Okay.
wanna see it. Yeah.
You everyone should see it. But if you see it and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that was really inappropriate. Why did Rachel recommend it?" I still think it's a really great movie with some really good themes in it, and I am gonna
Uh,
stand by that statement. It's a really good art.
yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean,
apologies if
you know
anyone gets
me, there are
offended.
books and there are things where I'm just like, "I love this, but who can I recommend it
Who
to?"
can I tell this to? But I really think it has an important message to it. And I think sometimes the squeamishness in general of evangelicals, which is my primary conversation partners, like the
Yeah.
squeamishness over something like, oh, there's blood and gore, or oh, there's sex in this
Yeah.
is the problem. The problem is that all of those things are very human experiences, and art is trying to tell a human experience.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there can't be gratuitous stuff, and not everything is for everybody.
Sure.
Honestly, we were talking about Nosferatu earlier today, and like I understand, I appreciate that movie, right? Like if you were to press me and be like, "Is this a good movie?" Yes, it's like an excellently done movie. Is it the kind of movie that I personally like want to see and like experience again? Not me personally. I would watch it again, but it's not like it doesn't hit like the soul of who I am. And like there's
Sure.
enough the gratuitousness, the visuality of it is enough for me that I'm like I don't really need to see that again. But for me, Sinners is like a bullseye, like right in like the heart of
Yeah. Yeah.
who I am, what I enjoy
Sure.
talking about and thinking about, and just beautifully executed. But
Yeah.
there's a scene in
Well,
there,
and
and you'll
I think
know,
there's also something to consider. There's a difference between being honest about the human experience and that can be horrifying and messy,
yeah,
and making porn.
yeah, yeah,
And
I
some
think,
movies are legitimately, like, violence porn or horror porn or
yeah,
something like that. And help me, I'm like, I know what I'm trying to say by porn. I mean, like, the vacuous, the
yeah,
superficial,
it's
the
yeah.
the the
Although
hol a hollow movement that imitates.
it's exploitative. Although Eli Roth would argue, who was like the cool, like the king of torture porn in early 2000s with
Yeah,
Hostel and his
yeah,
movies, he does see the gratuitousness of it as a like as a like take, like he's making
yeah,
a point by
yeah,
doing that.
yeah. Mhm,
And so I think it really just depends on the director and the creative
sure.
vision behind what they're doing. I mean,
Yeah,
for me, and also like how they conduct themselves on set. I think it's pretty clear, like as much as everybody wants to tell you that there's like so much, and there is like a lot of political intrigue in Game of Thrones. Like there's a lot of gratuitous scenes in Game of Thrones as well.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I can't speak for those actors, but I don't feel like when I hear Amelia Clark talk that I feel like she looks back very fondly at some of the
sure.
scenes that she was forced to do in that
Yeah,
show.
yeah.
That to me is a red flag that like regardless of what story they're telling, um
Right, right.
like
Yeah,
that the way they're embodying the way they are
right.
living
Yeah,
is
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
good.
And everyone can tell the difference, and I think some people can tell the difference. Some people may not, and, if that's not your cup of tea, that's totally fine. You can get at the truth of the human experience in other ways, you know?
Yeah,
But I think that
it's
that's why Ryan Coogler Oh, by the way, my mom had never seen Creed, and I was like, "What?"
Oh my gosh, Creed
I
is
was like,
so
"You have got
good.
to see that Creed." But there is a moment at the end when Michael B. Jordan's character is in the ring and Stallone's character is getting him back, getting him hyped up, getting him back, and they just exchange just, like, rough and ready, real quick, "I love you,"
I know.
kills me. Kills me because it is one of the most honest, authentic, and I think that that's one of the beautiful things that Ryan Coogler brings to his stories
Yeah.
is moments of of deep tenderness and connection.
You're gonna
Because
see
and that
that.
comes from I think it comes from his work, social work,
Yeah.
in lower income, in the marginalized communities that he worked in California and LA. I think it comes from that because he has seen the value of making those connections, and I think that that really truly comes through in his work that makes it different from other violent or horror movies.
Yeah, this is definitely the uh, there's a I can't even first of all, also, I gotta say the score of this movie is absolutely unbelievable. It is one of the best scores in recent
Okay,
memory.
okay.
Don't go listen to any of it before you go see the movie. Like, you should go in with as
You
very
like,
little knowledge of
with
the
the
score.
movie, sure.
But, like, you should then after the movie, you should go listen to the score. But it's truly unbelievable. I would say the one thing about this movie, I did want to say this today. I know we're totally off from surveillance capitalism, although I'm sure this is
We'll get
recording
back
us.
to it.
And it's fine because this is recording us. It's going to go on the internet. Somebody's going to database everything I'm saying, and then they're going to give me more recommendations of movies like Sinners to watch. And so I'll just be in the endless cycle, right? At least I'll be lulled into a sense of, like, just zombified. At least I'll be enjoying my life as I walk through this life in a surveillance capitalism stupor. But anyway, what I was going to say about this movie that I thought was excellent, and I think for white viewers this is incredibly important. So I'm not trying to speak out of turn here. I'm just saying, as a white viewer, what I experienced, and I hope for fellow white viewers that they pick up on this. I think this is a lot about space and the spaces that people of color can be in and create for themselves. And it gives a very strong, I would say this prior to watching this movie, I understood intellectually why white people in certain spaces would be uncomfortable for people that were for ethnic minorities that wanted to create an exclusive ethnic minority space, right? I would have never, like, been like, well, I need to be in that space with you. But I don't know if I would have understood at a heart level why that was so
Sure.
important. I would understand intellectually and respect the fact that, like, this is a black space, or this is a Latina space, or whatever. And
Totally.
I would have respected that reality, but couldn't have, like, understood that reality. I will say that Ryan Coogler did such an excellent job of communicating to me as the viewer why having space as a group is so important, and why establishing that space historically has been so important, and the actual material danger it is to ethnic minorities in those spaces when white people refuse to respect those boundaries and desire
Mm,
to be in those spaces because they think they deserve a spot in those spaces.
sure.
I found that to be probably one of the most profound takeaways of that movie as a white
Okay.
viewer. And it's definitely something that is going to stick with me, in not
Mhm.
just like a way of, like, I'll be thinking about it forever, but more like I fundamentally understand something very different about the world than before I saw that movie.
Yeah, yeah. That's really cool. That's really cool. And I think that that brings us I think that brings us back actually to the conversation about surveillance capitalism because it recognizes human experience. It's a story that is recognizing human experience in a way that can't be databased.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can't be reduced down to atomized bits of data and predicted,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and like that we're all just the same, or like all of us can just
Right,
be
right.
sort of
Yeah,
reduced down to the same kind of data. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think that that was something that really stood out to me in reading I mean, well, what stood out to me was I'm really tired of reading about these people,
You're like, I
reading about
hate Google.
horrible people and their horrible actions. But that was something that stood out to me was just the to go back to the cancer metaphor, just this metastasization, the metastasize. I cannot say that word. The growth of
The unfettered movement and growth
yes,
of the cancer.
because there's only so much experience that you can mine, right? And that's why they have to keep that's why they have to keep in the same loops. They have to keep doing the same things. Like they're really mining the same kinds of routine behaviors. They're not that's why they have to keep you there. And so I just thought it was interesting that these these attempts, these technologies of extraction and manipulation and prediction are really designed to stifle any kind of growth and curiosity. They're
Yeah.
really because you which is counterintuitive because it's like you'd actually probably get more if you just let people do their thing, but it's but then you have to tie it to this desire, this overwhelming desire for certainty and control. You can't like if you let people pursue growth and if you let people pursue their own curiosity, you don't know what you're gonna get. You cannot get you don't know you might the database might not be able to capture that effectively. It won't recognize that data. So that's why it's just has to keep staying in these same loops, like, you have to stay the same, and you have to stay the
Yeah.
same as your past self, because that's the only thing that can be captured and predicted. So that was the
Yeah.
thing that kind of was and your future the behavioral futures market is sold on keeping you the same as your past.
That's
Does
actually
this
a
make sense?
really Yes, that's actually a really good way of putting it. The way that she puts it in the book is she has this line at the very end of section 2 where she says, now the unself-conscious, easy freedom enjoyed by the human animal, the sense of being unrestrained that thrives in the mystery of distant places and intimate spaces, is simply friction on the path towards surveillance revenues. So, like, you breaking out of the mold, right, is a friction to revenue, and they
Yeah,
don't like that. And I
yeah,
think that's where, like, I even look at what we're doing right now, and part of the reason why I don't really care too much on if anybody ever watches this or not is because it's like the process of doing the talking about the book together is really what's most interesting to me, instead of the
yeah,
consumption of somebody else consuming what it is I'm saying. As like, is that really that helpful? I mean, maybe it will be helpful for some people in certain contexts, but like, I don't know, I think it's the back and forth with a different person and not an
yes,
algorithm that like is maybe our
yes,
best hope of breaking out of the
yes,
predictability, right?
yeah. I just read this article, it was on Christianity Today, and it was a group of researchers talking about 5-year longitudinal study that they did with, like, 200,000 people global. It was a global study, and I forget what the name of the study was, but they were really looking at human flourishing, and it was interesting because they were saying, the countries with the most material wealth and the best material experience. So, Western countries like UK, Sweden, US,
Yeah.
Canada, all of those countries, not necessarily doing well on a holistic human flourishing, but the countries that still have a lot of strong families, a lot of strong communities, a lot of strong religious observance,
Yeah.
strong religious communities, those countries reported higher levels of flourishing. And and I've seen this reported in other contexts as well. older individuals report greater levels of satisfaction than younger individuals. It used to be more of a U shape where younger, like the youngest and the oldest on the curve reported levels of satisfaction, and kind of the middle was the mushy, not so much. But it's now that has really just kind of skewed completely to older generations being reporting the greatest levels of happiness and satisfaction, and the younger generations are not. And the conclusion, I mean, the article about this report and about the study was like, this is just our first wave of insights. Like, we're still going through like second wave of crunching data and all this stuff. But it once again highlighted that it's human connection and it's human interaction and it's human experience that creates the best human life, not the database, isolated, atomized, online, virtual experience that we're told is real. It's
Yeah.
real. It's an experience. I mean, it's not that we're not experiencing, but it's not the whole of experience and it's not the full experience. And I think that that's interesting. Just to go respond to what you were saying. Yeah, it is this conversation. It is this conversation about the book that is more the most satisfying aspect. Of
Yeah.
course, we hope people will listen in and find something interesting or helpful. Of course, we're more than happy to share the conversation, but it's because you and I are having this connection over something that we're
Yeah.
curious about, and we're trying to figure out how do we help each other navigate this situation and become who we want to be in this situation.
Yeah, maybe the most constructive thing. I know I'm the worst marketer ever. That's why they don't hire me at my job to do marketing. I do editorial work. And they're like, don't sell our books because you're like, well, I mean, if it's not for you, don't read it. If you don't want to watch this video, you should probably just skip it. But what this kind of gets back to, I think, what could be most constructive for listeners right now, and certainly for you and I to talk about, is just kind of shifting over to the inevitablism conversation, which is kind of this idea of like and maybe you want to talk about Uncontract as well. I'll let you
Yeah.
decide. But there is one quote that I wanted to mention here. It's about Deloitte and the
Whoosh.
Deloitte. He said this quote on page 215. Deloitte acknowledges that according to its own survey data, most consumers reject telematics on the basis of privacy concerns and mistrust companies that want to monitor their behavior. This reluctance can be overcome, the consultants advise. You know what? Like, if I ever become a consultant on the side, Megan, and I'm like trying to like be like, here's how you can exploit your people more. Can you just give me a strong punch in the throat? I don't deserve to talk anymore.
Yeah.
Consultants, if you're listening to this and you're finding better ways to extract things, shame on you. Think about your job. Remember, like in the early church, people that worked in like the military actually questioned whether they should continue that vocation. You should be asking yourself that question too if you're using your expertise to exploit people. Okay, anyway, rant
Yes,
over
ma'am.
for now.
It'll always be incoming on this channel.
Somebody said to me the other day, I love the energy you bring to your rants. And I was like, I'm glad there's like 5 people in the world that have bandwidth for my rants, because we know your girl can go on a rant real hard. Ranting Rachel,
Yeah,
rantings with Rachel.
good
But
alliteration there.
I know, but they said the consultants advised by offering cost savings significant enough that people are willing to make the privacy trade off in spite of lingering concerns. If price inducements don't work, insurers are counseled to present behavioral monitoring as fun, interactive, competitive, and gratifying, rewarding drivers for improvements on their past record and relative to the broader policyholder pool. In this approach, known as gamification, drivers can be engaged to participate in performance based contests and incentive based challenges. If all else fails, though, insurers are advised to induce a sense of inevitability and helplessness in their customers. Gross. So gross. Like,
Yes.
just remember every single time you sign up for like, oh, I want to get on the Chipotle app so I can get like if I buy 9 burritos, get the 10th free. You just sold all of your data to Chipotle for $10, essentially, is what you just did. Like,
Yeah.
that's what we're
Yeah.
doing when we do this. And who do you want to
Yeah.
have your data? That's the question. And what are they going to do with
Yeah.
it? Maybe Chipotle's fine to have your data. Like Barnes and Noble can have all my data they want. I'm like, tell me what books to buy. It's fine. Just tell me.
Problem is your data won't stay there.
That's the problem, right? Barnes and Noble is probably going to
Yeah.
sell my data to
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
else.
I had actually highlighted that same quote and I had commented, so where did this willingness to trade privacy for savings or convenience come from?
Because we don't have enough money and we're all overworked. And so we're like, that's convenient, right?
Yeah.
It's way worse now, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
way worse now. Like, you might
But what is
say,
it? Well, I think it's also, to pull it back also to our theological anthropology, like we're just selfish little shits. Like if we think we could get a dime, not realizing we're spending $1, we're gonna do it.
yeah, I agree. Although you probably, if you're writing a theological anthropology, you should probably not use the line selfish little shits as your
Oh, I'm sorry. If you read the beginning of the sacred text, I think that's what you get out of it.
like really in summary, what's happening here is this is what I learned. Legit. I'm not denying it. But what I would say, I do have sympathy on people for like how it's the acceleration. It's like, what Andy Root
Yeah.
and Harmon Rosa
Yeah.
and all of those our buddies are talking about. Like, I do
Yeah.
think there's a sense where it's like you have so many places to be, and you like we're doing more kinds of work that are emotionally exhausting and mentally
Mhm.
exhausting, and you have 5 other things to be at, and the
Yeah. Yeah.
expectation is that you also, like, sometimes they force you online, like you
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
order this unless you sign up for an account and blah blah blah, so you're kind
That's
of
like what I
forced.
was talking about before we recorded, I mean, I don't
Yeah,
I'm not opposed to the idea of going back to, like, an old flip phone, because I mean, is there anything more satisfying than ending a call by snapping that thing shut?
yeah,
But,
I take a flip phone.
I mean, in order for me to do something like send family money easily, quickly, like, if it's something where it's a time sensitive, I have to do it, the best way to do it is to use Zelle through my banking app. I can't log in on my desktop to my banking and do that. It's a mobile only function.
Oh wow.
I can't,
Yeah,
if I want to go in through my desktop and use my desktop banking, I could do a bank transfer that could take a few days. I could request a check, like the bank to write a check and send it, few days. I could order checks and get a check, but how would I get the check? But then that means that the other person who's
yeah.
just as tied to all of this as I am has to figure out how to cash the stinking check and get the money. So again, convenience. 24 hours, 5 to 7 business days. Like everyone's like, well, 24 hours on my
Yeah.
mobile phone. And
Which
so,
is, yeah.
it's just things like that. It's just kind of like, well, so, but it's just like the expectations or the assumptions around how we should be. I think that that's the other interesting underlying implicit that we haven't talked about is that now that this is how we can do things, this is how we should do things.
Yeah, it's just like Ian Malcolm. And every time I open this book, I'm like, it always comes back to Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park. Like, just because we could do it, nobody ever stopped to ask if we should do it.
Yeah.
That is the question, right?
One of the absolute best, a little sidebar, one of the absolute best marketing campaigns that I have ever seen for a university, a liberal arts university. I forget which one it was. Ugh, I want to say it was like University of Oklahoma. One of those liberal art. The top half was this little guy, white lab coat, desk, beakers, all kinds of things, and you saw this little egg resting on the counter. It says, "Science can tell you how to make a dinosaur." And then the next frame was the same little guy running across the frame, and then you see these, like, little T-Rex limbs hovering
Yeah.
over him, and humanities can tell you why this might be a bad idea.
I mean, we could get in there's like a whole side thing that we could like talk about on the side here about like the philosophies that tech bros are consuming right
Yes.
now.
We should
And
probably do
like,
that. And if we do C.S. Lewis's space trilogy next, we totally can do that.
oh, like, I mean, it's like it's shocking to me.
Yeah.
Um and it feels like with like AI and stuff that they're probably also like, are they even reading or are they just reading some like random AI generated summary
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
some distillation? But anyway, regardless, like it's scary. I think the people
Yeah.
when you think about this knowledge asymmetry and how those people are formed that are then shaping us and making these
Mhm.
decisions, it's
Mhm.
like I don't know, like it feels like maybe we have a little bit less not say, but like we're probably underestimating how much we're influenced by
Sure, sure.
these
And I
guys
think that
and their own philosophies.
there's something we could, maybe not right now, but I think there's something we're thinking about separating out the difference between influence and manipulation. I don't think influence is a bad thing because you were, as a parent, I'm going to guess, you would be concerned if your children were hanging out with the kids who are, to use 90s imagery, the ones who are hanging out at the chain link fence smoking during third period, right? Like you would not want that for you, that would not be the best thing for your kids. You would want your kids hanging out with the soccer players who don't do drugs or, whatever. Insert your ideal person, human being here. But, same thing. Like you and I influence each other. I don't think that's a bad thing because we have similar visions, we have similar goals, we have similar desires for who we want to be and how we want to form and how we show up for each other. Manipulation is not that. Manipulation is the use of influence for specific ends and for specific goals that are not mutual.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a good distinction. And that's definitely what's happening right now. And I think our ignorance of how much of it's happening, I think, is particularly concerning. But I tried to explain on a side note, I was explaining to Asher yesterday about taxes, and I was like, well, this is how like a progressive tax, I was like, this is how a regressive tax system would work. And I like showed him like, okay, this like same good is gonna have like this tax on it, right? And let's pretend like your pie is this big and this person pie is this big. Like if this thing has the same tax on it, like it doesn't affect this person as much as it affects the person with the smaller pie, right? And then I was like, well, like a progressive tax system would take into account how big your pie is, right? Like it would say, well, your pie is so big that like you actually need to share a larger portion of your pie because even when you share a larger portion of your pie, you're still going to have plenty for yourself. But then I was showing, I was like, but what happens is when you have that really, really big pie like that, you can end up, and I started like making the circle like smaller and smaller. You like find loopholes in the tax system so that you don't have to pay and you have magical deductions. And even if you're like a really bad person, you might find like an offshore account that you can put your money in. He was like, wait a second. He's like, that's not fair. And I was like, yep. Yep.
Pretty
Now you
well,
know why I say billionaires as being a billionaire is unethical. Like this is why.
yeah.
And I was like, imagine if your pie is that big, you can hire people, in fact, lots of people, to help figure out how to make that pie look much smaller than it really is, so you don't have to pay as many taxes.
Oh, this pie is not as big as it looks. It's just it's an illusion of a pie.
Move
There
right
is no
along.
pie. Really,
There
there's
is
not a pie here.
There is no spoon. Anyway.
There is no pie, there is no spoon to eat the pie. It's just look elsewhere. But yeah, so I think the question of why we are willing to trade convenience and the appearance of savings, it's just like you go to the grocery store every week. There's a deal on sodas, right? There's a deal on cans of sodas. You could pay 10.99 for bucks, or you could wait until next week and you could buy two and get one free. Or you could wait until, or you have sitting right there a different brand that's on sale for 6.99 a box. It's the
Mhm.
exact same price
Yeah.
as the buy two, get one.
I
But
mean,
which sounds better? Which one sounds better? Buy two, get one free.
yeah.
Whichever brand you buy, you're going to pay the same amount of money. We're like, I'm getting a deal because I'm a selfish little shit.
Dude, I think you probably would ascribe more selfishness. I do think there are selfish people out there, but oftentimes I think the most selfish people often have the most resources to share. Some of the most selfish people I've ever interacted with, I'm always like, goodness, you don't know what it's like to not have any money in the bank at the end of the month, do you? Like, and the fact that you are being so, like close, keeping your resources so close to the vest and not sharing. Like, I really do think that people are like, I think that a lot of working class people really are generous people, and when they
Yeah.
go to the store and when they go to buy things, I mean, let's not talk about soda, but like general things, right, like at the
I
store
need,
they need, they are looking for a deal because it's like it's just they don't have margin, and everywhere that's going to look around them is going to be like, oh well, Dave Ramsey's going to say you're just living beyond your means. Well, like, I, as somebody who was shamed for a long time by Dave Ramsey, it's like, well, at some point you just have to make more money, because like it's not a living, like when you're doing all the things, when you're cloth diapering your kids and like using every scrap of food and never eating out and having one car and living in a 1,200 square foot house with five people at the time, right? Like, I mean, what more
yeah,
can you cut?
yeah, yeah,
It's about, and I think they exploit people who are looking for a deal. Not,
sure.
because like the rich person doesn't care that if, they can, buy two get one free because they don't need it. But I think the regular working
Yeah,
class person does want to feel like, oh, like I
yeah,
got what I
yeah,
needed and I got it for cheaper.
sure, sure. Well, and I think that that's kind of a weird but awkward and somehow good segue into this idea of the social contract.
Sure, go ahead. Let's go.
Because, but I think what you were talking about, like the generosity, like people willing to share what they do have, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that we tend to be more selfish the more we have. And we tend to kind of, think about in terms of, well, if I have less than, if someone else has more than that means I have less. But if you already don't have a lot, then,
Actually say it like this, maybe is a better way. I think our economy is set up in such a way that in order to have a lot, you, some of the most effective ways of having a lot very quickly are dehumanizing to other people, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
denying somebody else a right. It's exploiting somebody else that makes you rich. So I won't say there's not rich people that aren't generous. I think they do
sure,
exist.
sure,
They're probably the kind of people that like went into a profession, are still functionally a working class person. Probably
sure.
cost them a lot of money to go to college. It probably cost them a lot of years of training, and they're
Mhm.
probably making money. But I don't consider that the same as like, you can get really rich really fast if you get a TikTok following and then you do paid
Sure.
partnerships and you kind of suppress and background that those are paid
Mhm.
partnerships. You
Yeah,
can make a lot of money off of that.
yeah,
And that's exploitive. That's inherently exploitative
yeah,
behavior.
yeah,
There's plenty of that. We all
yeah,
know like
yeah,
landlords can be
yeah,
exploitative, right?
yeah,
That kind of
yeah,
behavior.
yeah. And I think that that is like that exploitative, dehumanizing approach is a much better segue to the idea of the contract and the uncontract. I mean, that essentially is what exploitation is doing. It's dissolving the social contract, that there is some sort of mutuality to our public and common interactions, that there are public and common goods that are available to everybody, that you show up at your place of employment, you do your work, and you are fairly and promptly compensated for that. Like, there are certain things that we have come to expect over the course of human civilization as good ways of interacting with each other so that mutual goals can be accomplished, right? That's kind of, a very bare bones understanding of a social contract. And I think what Zuboff highlights about surveillance capitalism and the companies that really drive it is this dissolving of that, what she calls the uncontract, that's based on these asymmetries of knowledge and power and learning and privilege. What you said before we started recording about privilege is about who gets to make a mistake. That the social contract allows for mistakes as well, I think. And this uncontract is saying in the pursuit of certainty and control and profit, you can't make a mistake. Mistakes are costly. Mistakes are friction.
Yeah.
Mistakes aren't data. Mistakes don't help us, don't give us anything. And I think that we see this in, how easily someone can be canceled online or how easily we can find things that people have said in the past and hold it against them. Again, this, you know, behavioral future relies on our past self. Again, how does this make sense? Our experience of ourselves and each other proves that we shift and change over time, and yet we're supposed to be the same online. Like, we can't evolve because it's costly, because you can't predict that. What, you know? So I think that is, I really liked, Zuboff talked about this writer, Langdon Winner. He had his book, 1977 book, Autonomous Technology. And he says, what we lack is our bearings, because he described the ways in which our experience of things technological confounds our vision, our expectation, and our capacity to make intelligent judgments. Well, because this is in response to these questions of how has this nightmare become banal? Where's our sense of astonishment and outrage? We lack our bearings. This is Winner's response. Our vision, our expectations, and our capacity to make intelligent judgments have been confounded. Categories, arguments, conclusions, and choices that would have been entirely obvious in earlier times are obvious no longer. What Varian celebrates here is not a new form of contract, but rather a final solution to the enduring uncertainty that is the result of contract as a means of private ordering. So we can't just order ourselves according to what makes sense in the local and the relational sphere. We have to be ordered according to the database. And that means that certain kinds of categories and arguments and choices can't be captured. They can't be collected. And I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling here, but I thought that was, I'm very interested in the philosophy, like the why behind all of this. And I thought that was an interesting observation, is that what we lack is our bearings and
Yeah.
how things logical confound. I think it's Asimov who basically says that all technology is sufficiently advanced beyond our comprehension looks like magic.
Yeah.
And I think because we're dealing with very simple constructions, algorithms are very simple constructions of if-then statements, but what we're dealing with is such a complex layering and interaction of these algorithms that we can't make it's just this big Gordian knot at this point. So now it just looks like magic because we don't understand, we can't follow how it works
Yeah.
from the start to its conclusion.
Well, you
And
couldn't,
yeah,
yeah, you couldn't possibly, with the amount of money and resources and infrastructure that they're going to have at something like that, like at a company like Google or
definitely.
Twitter or Meta or something like that. And the end of that section, just to clarify what we're talking about when we say uncontract, there's a couple lines at the end of that section I think are
Oh, yeah.
good. She says the uncontract is not a space of contractual relations, but rather a unilateral execution that makes those relations unnecessary. The uncontract desocializes the contract, manufacturing certainty through the substitution of automated procedures for promises, dialogue, shared meaning, problem solving, dispute resolution, and trust, the expressions of solidarity and human agency that have been gradually institutionalized in the notion of contract over the course of the millennia. The uncontract bypasses all that social work in favor of compulsion, and it does so for the sake of a more lucrative prediction products that approximate observation and therefore guarantee outcomes. And I think that that's a very helpful summary of really what she's saying here is that
Mhm.
it's bypassing the human aspect of what's going on.
Yeah.
That's kind of I think what you were getting at here. It's bypassing
Mhm.
the human aspect of what this means. And when you look at something like, I mean, not that like cancel culture to me is more of a like it's more symptomatic. It's not really the problem in the sense that I
Sure.
think
Yeah.
the reason that because when we talk about cancel culture right now in our like larger discourse, it's usually like
Mhm.
is cancel culture good or bad? Well, I don't know if somebody's a horrible person and somebody's like, "Hey, guess what I found out over here? This person did this really horrible thing in the past." Maybe that person shouldn't be in that position of power. Like maybe if somebody combed through my online interaction
Legitimate
actually
consequences to
yeah. Like number
yeah.
one, cancel culture often, not always, but like, and again, this is where like precision of language, it just really kills me right now. Like, is there a chance that I could get canceled? Of course, there's a chance I could get canceled. Is the likelihood of me being canceled as large as, say, like a celebrity pastor or like a famous person in Hollywood? No, not really. Why? Because the amount of power that I have is much
Mhm.
smaller in the like internet space and also within the public
Mhm.
knowledge than another person. But like by all means, like I think how this goes back to like and this is always the part that was like so crazy to me is like and maybe my words will come back to eat me but I or to bite me, not eat me. I hope they don't eat me, but like I do think there is a sense where if we're serious about Christian character and growth, right? You're right. That doesn't mean that we're the same as we were 10 years ago, right? And it really means like we might have thought something was funny or said something on the internet that like in 2008, right, was like acceptable.
Fine.
And now we look in 2025 when we've learned more, we've heard more people's experiences, and we're like, oh,
Mhm.
that like wasn't a very good thing for me to say. If I got like some amount of power and somebody drummed up something, right, that I did in
Mhm.
the past, I would hope I'd be able to be like, you're right, that was really crappy of me to say. I can't believe I even thought that was funny. And if I like at some point you kind of have to take, I think, as a Christian, like a little bit of like an Esther mentality. It's like if I perish, I perish. I mean,
Sure.
I don't want somebody to. I'm sure if somebody looked back and scrutinized my life, there would be things to say that were like bad about what hot takes that I had that I thought I was like really edgy, and actually I just was like ignorant and rude,
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
But at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same time
Yeah.
but I do think that the problem with cancel culture is not that like what should we cancel people or not. The question is the internet, based on the algorithmic realities of how the internet works, the most
Mhm.
effective place to restore someone's social contract, right?
Sure. Yeah,
because
yeah,
we've just said that the whole system is set up to dehumanize. So of
yeah.
course everyone's going to pile on somebody.
Mhm.
And whether that's right or not, that's a separate question. But I think we can definitively answer, is that constructive for that person's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
eventual like repentance and growth? Probably not.
yeah. One of the things that came to mind when you were talking is the book Celebrities for Jesus, Caitlin Beatty. And the thing, like the key thing that that she really kind of, that book really helped unlock for me was the danger of influence without proximity. And and I think that that's that quote that you read, "The uncontract desocializes the contract, manufacturing certainty through the substitution of automated procedures for promises, dialogue, shared meaning, problem solving, dispute resolution, and trust, the expressions of solidarity and human agency that have been gradually institutionalized over millennia." You can't get trust and promises and shared meaning without some sort of proximity over time. So again, we're coming back to like time and seeing people over time and building a relationship over time that allows you to navigate and negotiate changes and uncertainty. Whereas the uncontract wants to demolish all that. It doesn't trust that we'll get there in time. It doesn't trust that it will get the results that it wants in time. And it relies on lack of proximity. However, we would want to define proximity, whether it's this, our interactions with this, whether it's in person proximity. So I'm just kind of trying to walk my way through this, and it want the uncontract is deliberate isolation. It is deliberate. It's like an oubliette, right? Do you know that? The oubliette? It's it's a prison without walls. It's just basically the easiest way to form an oubliette is just a ledge and a wall, and you just drop someone down and there's no handholds. The ledge is maybe 6 feet wide and you can walk around. You can move, you can do things, but you can't leave because there's no walls, there's no handholds, there's no way to get out of it. And so that's what these, we have the appearance of freedom, that
Oh yeah.
telemetry, that invisible technology. In chapter 8, she talks about how the rendition of your body starts with your phone because we carry it with us everywhere. It's so invisible, but it's rendering our experience into this data, but it's an open air prison. It's a prison without walls. We can move around as freely as we think want to, but we can
Yeah.
only move in this circumscribed space made by this uncontract, and we can only interact with people by calling across the canyon, right?
Yeah. I
But
think the two
the
things.
possibility of relationship and influence diminishes because, who's gonna call across the canyon for a real in-depth conversation all the time?
Yeah. I mean, I think the two things I'm going to take away from this are like, one, the very, you mentioned like the rendering starts with your phone. Like, I just wonder if there are ways, even in like my own house, that I can just like put my phone off of myself because I'm not good at that. I kind of keep it on me all the time.
Mhm.
Um, so just starting to be a little bit more aware of that. But then the other piece too is I think social contracts, like Christians should be very aware of this part of the conversation. And
You'd
I
think.
think you would think they'd be, instead of like praising companies for being business savvy, like, well, this person's just a great businessman. No, he's not. He's a bully who's just completely upended social contracts. Like, that's not a great business person. That's actually a really terrible person who is literally anti Christian. You would think, especially for people that really like put a lot of weight, like bet the farm on like language around covenant, that we would talk about social contracts and and how problematic it is when those are exploited more
Hmm.
often. And yet this doesn't seem, no one seems to be batting an eye about how these contracts have been broken with these large companies. But
Hmm.
regardless of what those companies do, because obviously I can't control Empire, I'm certainly not going to be BFFs with Empire, and they can't sit at my lunch table, that's for sure. But what I can do is I can think about the contracts that I enter into and the contracts that I
Hmm.
have power over, in the sense that I'm always scrutinizing, and I want to keep scrutinizing, like contracts as they relate to my work, right? Like, are we really finding ways to write contracts in business partnerships and, with people in my personal life, are we doing it in ways that's really beneficial for everybody involved? Or is someone
Hmm.
getting the short end of the stick here? Is somebody
Right.
getting screwed over? Because to me, that's the question, is like, and that means fighting for people to have equitable pay, fighting for people to have good work-life balance, fighting for people to feel like they have creative ownership over their work. These are all things I think that are values of mine,
Yeah.
regardless of, and there's all kinds of spheres of my own personal life where I can put that kind of stuff into action and make sure
Hmm.
that I use my little slice of influence to help make the people in my sphere's lives better, and
Right.
like for being around me. That feel, it's not perfect, it's not going to fix
Yeah.
the Empire situation, but I think
Yeah.
it does. It is the kind of like 5 loaves, or the 2 fish 5 loaves, that
Sure.
Jesus can use
Yeah.
in really cool
Yeah.
ways.
And I think it's interesting because, our primary experience is with American evangelical. So this is really the only slice that I can speak to with any certainty, with any clarity. But American evangelicalism is really, really good at just co opting new technologies for the sake of evangelism. And there's just this rush to adopt new technologies as tools for spreading the gospel with a complete lack of insight, reflection, consideration, care, all of those things for the assumptions that went into building those tools or those strategies, the business strategies or whatever that are constantly imported into church models. And I think when you are constantly just adopting an unreflective adoption of tools like that, I think you just don't realize, again, how much it's forming you into opening some opportunities and foreclosing others. You don't realize how these technologies, these tools are built on the assumption that some people's experience matters more or some people's goals matter more, right? Because I think that's what that's what this is saying is the founders of Google and Meta, Microsoft, and all that, their goals matter more than ours.
Oh yeah, I mean, their goals are money. Their goals are
Right,
money.
right.
I mean, it's
The
absurd.
power
It's,
of domination, Elmo and the fire.
I know. I really want someone to write a book on like greed, and like how I really think greed is like a disorder, not more than just like disordered desire, but like it's like an actual like disorder, in the sense of like you're like, why would you need more money? It doesn't make sense to the rest of us. Like a billion
Yeah.
dollars does not make sense to us. And
No,
if anybody says $1 billion doesn't make sense, you should just go Google the difference between a million and a billion and just try to wrap your brain around it. Nobody needs $1 billion. Nobody needs $1 billion.
no,
Um,
no.
and
Of personal wealth, no.
no,
Mm-mm.
they don't. And so the question then becomes like, why, when we're talking about Google and Meta and and X and all of this. These are not people that have $1 billion. They're not Selena Gomez, who's a billionaire. She's like 1 point something. These people have hundreds of billions of dollars. Like, do people understand how absolutely insane that is? That, like, and then the response is not like, oh, sweet, like I'm gonna go live out my days on a lake house and go do puzzles and maybe get a jet ski. Like, they're like, no, I need more. Like,
Right, right. Yeah.
it's unfathomable.
Scripture has something to say about this.
And yet, the ways
And yeah,
that the ways that we have idolized
yeah.
successful business people in the church is a
And
problem.
it's because of well, how do I want to say? Do I want to say it's an idolization of capitalism? Sure, why not? It's because if they're doing what they're supposed if they're doing like what's wrong with making money? Like isn't that how it's supposed to work?
Yeah, the problem is like we're conflating like I worked 40 hours a week and took home a paycheck to like
Yeah,
I literally exist on this planet and take in a breath and earn X amount of thousands of dollars a second, right?
yeah,
That is
yeah.
not the same thing. And like
Right,
that's the other
right. No,
crazy thing is
I
like,
agree with you. I'm just saying that that's kind of the mentality. Like there is no questioning like who needs to earn that much money and who needs to have that much personal
oh,
wealth
I know.
if they're just being a good business person.
Yeah, they're just doing the Protestant work ethic thing. I know I'm not going to make any friends in my little group of people on this topic. I'll be a
Yeah,
grumpy lady to my grave and be like, I mean, my
yeah,
kids will know it because I'm
yeah,
always like,
yeah.
there's no such thing as a good billionaire.
But I think that there's also another avenue of exploration here in all of these things that we're talking about, all of this, you know, like you had talked about, like the philosophies of the tech bros, and all
Yeah,
the inevitabilism. Like Zuboff talks about how it's so the rhetoric of inevitability is so ubiquitous that it's just a considered like full blown ideology. It's a religious. It's an article of faith here that all of this stuff is going to happen and, you know, so that someone has $1 billion of personal wealth, all of this stuff I think can also be tied to the presence or the lack of a moral framework, some sort of moral understanding of human relations and reciprocity. And we haven't even like really gotten into that one, but like that is something that I'm so interested in exploring, like just kind of like understanding economics and capitalism in general and like why everyone is just like why it's so horrible right now. And I think it's also because like and Zumoff talked about this in part one. Like this lack of reciprocity. Like, all these guardrails were taken off corporations in having having to create what are in I'm losing my train of thought.
talk about
But
raw capitalism being like it's not good, and I think
right,
that
right,
that's the point here is that we really have failed, I think, in educating the general population that like a critique of capitalism is not saying capitalism is bad, therefore I'm a communist or a socialist. A
right.
critique of capitalism is offering a sensical restraint on a
Yes,
system. And a Christian should have zero problem with this. We use this rhetoric all the time. Sex isn't bad. It's just it's meant to be within the confines of marriage. We do this all the time, right? Like, uh,
the same
that's
logic.
the
Yes,
one that comes to mind, right? So, like,
yeah,
why in the world do we have a problem saying capitalism isn't bad, but it needs to be restrained in really
yes,
material legislative,
yes,
initiative
yes,
ways so that the regular people who are participating in this system
yes. I
have an
remember.
opportunity to flourish.
Yeah, I
It,
remember
it's
one of
not
my friends.
Well, and let me
Yeah.
just say this one more thing. It's like it's not at the expense of the billionaire. This is my point. This is why it's
Right, right.
so crazy. We are not talking about these sorts of things at the expense of the billionaire. Let's pretend like he lost $10 billion of net worth. It changes nothing. It changes nothing materially for this person. We're talking about, though, $10 billion back in the pot because you constrain somebody. But that's a big deal. That's a big deal for
Sure.
regular people like you and me.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
that's what drives me nuts.
yeah. I remember one of my friends telling me about Adam Smith's book thought, 1700s dude. And she's like, well, his theory was that greed would check greed. And I remember when she told me that, I just looked at her with this like completely aghast look on my face. I'm going, "Ch- greed, greed.
Yeah, the solution isn't adding more
A good
greed, I
idea. I
don't
just,
think. Greed is not going to fix our problems, and
right.
colluding with greed is certainly not going to help our problems. And I really wish that the Christian church really was a witness, because I think people really would respect the
Hmm.
church more if we really weren't out there saying one thing and then undercutting that by the lifestyles that we were living and aspiring to live. Maybe we're not
Sure.
billionaires, but there's certainly
Yeah.
plenty of us out there who are
Yeah.
looking to live lavish lifestyles and have lots of people and entities orbit around us. And I think that is what people are really turned off by. That's why people
Hmm.
don't really like take seriously the Christian witness
Sure.
today,
Yeah.
is because
Yeah.
at a really massive
We
level. And
don't believe
maybe,
it.
what'd you say?
It's because when they look at what we're saying and what we're doing, they're like, why should I go into
Yeah.
that? You don't believe it?
And like TBD, honestly, and this is my question, like it are there more people that are being greedy these days, or does the algorithm, push up the greedy people? So all we see is the greedy people. I can't really answer that question, but I think then the answer has to be, the solution has to be,
Yeah.
we need to not create the kinds of people that can even be like pushed out in the algorithm that are like,
Yeah.
here's
Yeah.
the,
Yeah. Well, I
celebrity
mean,
Christian.
Renee DeRusta, and I got to go back and review some of my notes on her book, Invisible Rulers. But she talks about that trifecta of influencer, algorithm, and audience and incentives. Like I mean, it's really a system of incentives and what gets rewarded and what's set up to get rewarded and what are the choices made to give the rewards. And influencers get rewarded for either stoking outrage or fear or stoking unrestrained consumption, which all of that ends up generating money somehow. I don't understand. Money at this point, I'm like, money is a fiction. Money is just a surreal. Money is whatever we say it is. At this I
I
mean,
know,
if
right? Yeah.
Amazon can if there's a rumor that Amazon's gonna put the tariff prices on their webpage and then somebody calls somebody up and says, "Please don't do that," and Amazon goes, "Oh, no, we weren't gonna do that." And all of a sudden now then economics is just performance, and what is money? Money is. Money is a tautology at this point.
Yeah, it's like all
And
fake.
you're into
Well, do you want to shift to talking about either what we read? I don't know. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but did you
Yeah,
want to talk
let's
about
do
what
that.
you?
I think we kind of let's just wrap up and say that even though we did not specifically mention chapter 8 was part of this conversation because chapter 8 is essentially all about the capture and the transformation of human experience into data, literal
Yes,
data that goes into the database.
rendering the human experience.
Yes. So that is chapter 8. We really have been talking about it this whole time, and we suspect that our next conversation will be on chapters 9, 10, and 11 because that will wrap up part
Part
2.
two.
So, oh boy, what fun we shall have. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for
Yeah.
listening to us. We will be back in your ears and in your eyeballs very soon.
Bye.
Bye.